Hey, what's going on everybody? I'm Waller's Wallet, and in this video, we're going to be looking at the United Excursionist Perk and how this benefit can help you travel more and help you save miles booking your next trip. Now, if you're somebody who likes credit card rewards and learning how to travel for less, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to turn that notification bell on as well so you don't miss out on future videos. Also, consider giving this video a thumbs up. It really does help the channel out. Now, the United Excursionist Perk is an awesome benefit, and if you can learn how to use this benefit, it'll help you save miles for upcoming trips and even help you extend your travels. And not every program offers benefits like this, so it's great that United still offers this benefit. But the first question you might be asking yourself is, what on earth is the Excursionist Perk? The Excursionist Perk allows you to add a free one-way ticket on your travels when you book a multi-city ticket. It's important to remember you cannot use the Excursionist Perk when you're only booking a one-way ticket. And when you book a multi-city award, the itinerary doesn't even need to make sense. It can be 3 separate one-way tickets when you're doing this, and I'll show you some examples here in a few minutes. And just like everything else in this game, there are rules when it comes to using the Excursionist Perk. But for the most part, I think the rules are pretty easy, which is great, because some programs can be a little bit tougher for people to understand. Now, you cannot use the Excursionist Perk in the region you start your travel in. So that means if you start here in the United States, you can't use the Excursionist Perk in the US, but you can use it in other regions of the world. Now, if you were looking to use a stopover here in the United States, then I would actually look at a program like Airlines because they do allow a stopover for domestic US travel. Now, the travel needs to finish in the region you started in. So if you started here in the US, your travel needs to finish in the US. But that doesn't mean it needs to end at the same airport you left from. It just needs to be in the same region. So for example, if you left from New York for an international trip, you could use your Excursionist Perk for any region outside of the United States, then fly into another United States airport. You do not need to fly back into New York. The next rule that can really trip people up is the fact that the Excursionist Perk needs to be used within one region. So if you were looking to fly and use the Excursionist Perk within Europe, then you need to fly within Europe. You can't go from Europe to Africa using the Excursionist Perk because that's not going to qualify. And here is the region chart from United, so be sure to look up the different regions to see which countries fall into which regions so you know which countries you can use the Excursionist Perk in. And it will be important to understand the regions so you can get good use from this benefit. It can be quite frustrating for people to see this benefit isn't working, only to realize you weren't booking within the same region. And if you look, certain countries are split into multiple regions, so pay attention to that. Next is that the Excursions Perk will work for the same cabin of service or lower that you booked your first leg in. So if you flew in economy over to Europe, you cannot use the Excursions Perk to fly business class for that free segment. But if you flew business class to Europe, then you can either fly business or coach class to using your Excursionist Perk. Then it's also important to know that the Excursionist Perk only works for one free segment. So if you're booking a multi-city trip with a few stops along the way, your first use will be the free use and then you'll pay miles for the others. Now, when you're using the Excursionist Perk, it won't cost you any miles for that segment, but you do still need to pay the taxes and fees on that ticket. And depending on the type of traveler you are or the options of other airlines out there, using this benefit may or may not be best for you, and I'll explain that here in a few minutes as well. All right, now let's get to the good stuff and actually talk about using this benefit. And one of the great things about the Excursionist Perk is the fact that it can originate anywhere in the world. Your itinerary does not need to start in the United States, and you don't even need to fly on United Metal to use this benefit. But really, in order to get comfortable with the Excursionist Perk, you need to get on United's website and start searching and practicing. And the opportunities to use this benefit are really great. Now, when you look at United's interactive map, when you originate your travels outside of the United States, flights that are 800 miles or less will only be 8,000 miles one way, with the exception of Japan, which will be 5,000 miles one way for flights that are 800 miles or less. So if you happen to have a short haul flight that starts outside of the United States and had travel within the US later this year, you could look to add a US ticket as your Excursionist Perk, which could save you some miles. And there are a lot of different ways that you can use the Excursionist Perk, but here are a couple of examples showing you how you can use the Excursionist Perk. Now, I will tell you, there are tons of ways of using this benefit, and I'm definitely not going to hit on all the different ways to use it, but the more you practice, the better it will be for you. So let's take a look at our first example, using the Excursionist Perk as a stopover. And for this example, we're going to be looking to fly from Boston to Barcelona with a stopover in Paris. All right, so the first thing you want to do is you want to head over to United's website and you want to go down and you want to select Advanced Search. This is important because this is how you're going to get to the multi-city function. Now from here, you're going to select multi-city and you're going to want to book with miles. Now for our first example, we're going to be flying from Boston to Paris. That's because Paris is where our stopover is going to be. We're leaving out on January 10th. And from there, we're going to go from Paris to Barcelona on January 17th. And then we're going to add another destination. And we're going to go from Barcelona back to Boston, back on January 20th. And then we're going to find flights. All right, now that our options show up, we're not really worried. This is just for example purposes. We're not really worried about flight times or whatnot. So we're going to select our first option, 30,000 miles and $5.60 flying from Boston to Paris. Then for the Paris segment to Barcelona is where we're going to utilize the Excursionist Perk. Here you can see it's 0 miles and $50.20 to fly from Paris to Barcelona. So we're going to select that. And then on the way home from Barcelona to back to Boston, it should be another 30,000 miles. And here it's $45.05. And for this option here, it would be 60,000 miles and $100.85 in taxes to booking this with that stopover there in Paris before moving on to Barcelona. Now, one thing we did want to take a look at though was if you were to go over and search this one way from Paris to Barcelona on January 17th. You can see EasyJet and Vueling have options here. Our EasyJet is going to be $35 one way, and it's a low-cost carrier. So if you're okay with flying a low-cost carrier and packing cheaper, this is going to be a better option for you than utilizing the Excursions Perk. But I know some people aren't big fans of these low-cost carriers, so by all means, you can see Air France would be $60, so you're saving yourself some money by utilizing the Excursionist Perk here. And in this example was more of a simple way of using your Excursionist Perk as a stopover. Now let's talk about nesting itineraries. And this is really where you can string together some really great options and trips. And nesting itineraries is booking separate tickets that overlap or help you with future bookings. Now remember, with the Excursionist Perk, you can book 3 separate one-way tickets. Now let's look at an example that could be a little bit more complicated, but can really show you how great this benefit can be. Now let's say you had a couple of trips you were looking to book. Maybe you want to go visit some friends in San Francisco, planning some time in Europe, and you were thinking of visiting Barcelona, Paris, and Bucharest, and then you wanted to see some family in Florida. So let's see how we can do this. So remember, we want to go to this advanced search. We're going to go multi-city. We're going to book with miles. Now the first segment we're going to be doing is Boston to San Francisco on 9/11. The second leg we're going to be doing is Barcelona to Paris, and that's going to be on 11/28. In the last segment, we're going to be doing Boston to Miami, and that's going to be on 2/9. Now here we see our first option here is nonstop. It's going to be 12,500 miles one way. That's what we would expect this to be. Now our Barcelona to Paris segment should be 0 miles, and sure enough it is. And then from Boston to Miami, again, should be 12,500 miles, which it is. So right now we're at 25,000 miles and about $45 in taxes. Now let's jump to another browser and we're going to search again. Remember, advanced search. We're going to go multi-city. We're going to do by miles. But now we're basically looking in the reverse here. We're going to be going San Francisco back to Boston to finish out that initial itinerary on flying out. We're going to say you're flying back on the 18th of September. The next spot is that we want to go from Paris to Romania. We're going to fly that on 12/2. And then we're going to be flying back Miami over to Boston on 2/16. Now by doing this here, we've basically booked out our first ticket from Boston to San Francisco in round trip. So that first trip number 1 is completely booked. Now what we're doing here for this Excursionist Perk benefit, we're basically getting us from our original segment from Barcelona to Paris. Now we're going from Paris to Romania. And that's going to be $48 and no miles. And the last part of this trip is going to get us back round trip from that Boston to Miami trip to see, friends or family, whatever you're doing down in Miami. And here, once again, we see another 25,000 miles and about $59 in taxes. And so far, we have booked out 2 round trip tickets here, and we're setting the groundwork for our European trip as well. So now let's go to another browser. Again, advanced search, multi-city. We're going to select by miles. Now for this one here, we're leaving out of Boston, heading over to Barcelona. The second leg here where our Excursionist Perk will be used is Romania. And I threw an Amsterdam at the end because why not? Going to go to Amsterdam. And then that is going to be on 12/6. And then on the last part, we're going to go back from Amsterdam back to Boston on 12/10. And we're going to go ahead and book flights. Now our outbound flight here is 30,000 miles and $5.60, which is really awesome. Our Romania trip to Amsterdam, that's going to be our Excursionist Perk. It's going to be 0 miles and $36.50. And on the flight home from Amsterdam to Boston, that should again be 30,000 miles plus taxes. The taxes here is $60.65. So here you go, you can see it's 60,000 miles and $102.75. Now, if you've been paying attention, we've flown Boston to San Francisco round trip. We've flown Boston to Miami round trip. And for this trip, we have flown Boston to Barcelona, Barcelona to Paris, Paris to Romania, Bucharest, Romania, Bucharest to Amsterdam, and Amsterdam back to Boston. Now, because we've utilized the Excursionist Perk for most of our European trip, except for the outbound and return flight, you have just flown to see 4 different cities in Europe for 60,000 miles plus taxes and fees. Because you utilized the Excursionist Perk and nested those itineraries together, you basically just scored yourself a really kick-ass trip over to Europe at no additional cost in miles, just some extra taxes and fees, which were really low. Now, by using the Excursionist Perk, this would only cost you 110,000 miles and roughly $200 to getting you 3 trips by nesting itineraries together and planning ahead. And if you tried booking just the Europe trip on its own without using the Excursionist Perk in this fashion, it would cost you 90,000 miles plus about $200 in fees. So for 20,000 more miles, you can add on 2 round-trip domestic tickets as well. Now I realize not everyone can do this, but if you're someone who can plan out your trips in advance, then you can see there are some really great opportunities here. Now the Excursionist Perk is not perfect, but it is a great benefit, and the number of airlines offering benefits like this are very few. Plus, it can really add some amazing value depending on how you are looking to use it. And there are just so many ways to using this benefit. It really just depends on how you want to travel and the amount of time you want to spend using it. Now, one thing I did want to tell you is that I've seen issues before when you're searching on United. Because if you start looking at flight options, either one way or round trip, sometimes flight options disappear when you go to a multi-city function. But you should be able to call into United and have this booked over the phone if you were seeing those when you book one way or round trips. But I think you can see that the Excursionist Perk is a great way to stretch your miles, and it can even help you see more destinations. So tell me, have you ever used the Excursionist Perk? Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in this video. If you want to help support the channel, a simple way would be links on the website or in the description below. And if you know somebody who could benefit from this video, feel free to share it with them. And until next time, safe travels and take care.